There's a peculiar weight that settles in the mind when thoughts begin to spiral. It starts quietly, perhaps with a single concern or memory, but soon multiplies into an endless stream of what-ifs, should-haves, and might-bes. This mental chatter, this relentless turning over of ideas and worries, has become one of the most common sources of suffering in our modern world. We call it overthinking, and while it feels productive in the moment, it often leaves us more exhausted and confused than when we began. Understanding why our minds fall into these patterns requires us to look beneath the surface of consciousness itself. The human brain, evolved over millions of years, was designed primarily for survival. Our ancestors needed to constantly scan for threats, plan for dangers, and replay past events to learn from mistakes. This hypervigilant mental state served them well when facing predators or navigating harsh environments. However, in our contemporary world, where physical threats are rare but psychological stresses are abundant, this same survival mechanism has become a source of chronic mental unrest. Neuroscience reveals that overthinking activates what researchers call the default mode network, a collection of brain regions that become active when we're not focused on specific tasks. This network includes areas responsible for self-referential thinking, mental time travel, and social cognition. When this system becomes overactive, we find ourselves caught in loops of rumination, constantly analyzing past events or anxiously projecting future scenarios. The prefrontal cortex, our brain's executive center, becomes overwhelmed trying to process and solve problems that often have no clear solutions. What makes overthinking particularly draining is its relationship with our emotional energy. Each thought carries with it an emotional charge, and when we replay the same concerns repeatedly, we're essentially re-experiencing the associated feelings over and over again. Imagine carrying a heavy stone up a hill, setting it down, then immediately picking it up to carry it up the same hill again. This is what happens in our minds when we overthink. We exhaust ourselves not through physical labor, but through the repetitive emotional labor of processing the same material without resolution. The ancient philosophers understood this human tendency toward mental turbulence long before we had brain scanners or psychological theories. The Stoics of ancient Greece and Rome developed sophisticated approaches to mental tranquility that remain remarkably relevant today. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his personal journal that would later become Meditations, observed that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. He recognized that much of our distress comes not from external events themselves, but from our interpretations and endless mental elaborations of those events. Epictetus, another Stoic philosopher, taught the fundamental distinction between what is within our control and what lies beyond it. This simple yet profound insight cuts to the heart of overthinking. When we ruminate, we're often trying to mentally solve problems that are either already resolved, haven't happened yet, or are entirely outside our sphere of influence. The Stoics suggested that peace comes from focusing our mental energy only on what we can actually affect, while accepting everything else with equanimity. Buddhism offers another ancient perspective on the restless mind. The Buddha described the untrained mind as being like a monkey, jumping from branch to branch, never settling in one place for long. This monkey mind is driven by what Buddhists call the three poisons: greed, hatred, and delusion. In the context of overthinking, delusion is particularly relevant. We become deluded into believing that more thinking will lead to better outcomes, that if we just analyze the situation from one more angle, we'll find the perfect solution or achieve complete certainty. The Buddhist concept of non-attachment provides a gentle alternative to this mental grasping. Non-attachment doesn't mean becoming indifferent or uncaring. Rather, it means holding our thoughts and concerns lightly, like clouds passing through the sky of consciousness. We can observe them, acknowledge them, even learn from them, without becoming entangled in their emotional weight or convinced that we must solve every mental puzzle they present. Both traditions emphasize the importance of present moment awareness as an antidote to mental wandering. When we're fully engaged with what's happening right now, there's little mental space left for rumination about the past or anxiety about the future. This isn't about forcing ourselves to stop thinking, which is both impossible and counterproductive. Instead, it's about gently redirecting our attention to immediate sensory experience, to the breath, to the feeling of our feet on the ground, to whatever anchors us in the here and now. Modern psychology has validated many of these ancient insights through empirical research. Cognitive behavioral therapy recognizes that our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are interconnected, and that changing one element can influence the others. When we're overthinking, we're often caught in what CBT calls cognitive distortions, systematic errors in thinking that maintain emotional distress. These might include catastrophizing, where we imagine the worst possible outcomes, or rumination, where we repeatedly focus on problems without moving toward solutions. The therapeutic approach to overthinking often begins with awareness. Many people don't realize how much mental energy they're spending on repetitive thoughts until they begin to observe their thinking patterns consciously. This metacognitive awareness, the ability to think about thinking, creates a small but crucial space between ourselves and our thoughts. In that space, we discover that we are not our thoughts. We are the awareness that observes them. Mindfulness, drawn from Buddhist meditation practices but now widely used in secular therapy, offers practical tools for developing this observational stance. When we practice mindfulness, we learn to notice thoughts as they arise without immediately engaging with their content. We might observe, "I'm having the thought that I should have handled that situation differently," rather than diving into an analysis of what we should have done. This subtle shift in language reflects a profound change in our relationship with mental activity. The practice of mindfulness reveals something remarkable about thoughts. They're temporary. Like weather patterns, they arise, persist for a while, then naturally fade away if we don't feed them with additional attention and analysis. Overthinking occurs when we grab onto thoughts and elaborate them, spinning them into complex narratives and emotional dramas. Mindfulness teaches us to let thoughts come and go like visitors, acknowledging them politely without inviting them to stay for dinner. Journaling can serve as another bridge between ancient wisdom and modern therapeutic practice. When we write down our concerns, we externalize them, moving them from the swirling chaos of mental space onto the concrete reality of paper or screen. This process often reveals that our worries are less substantial than they seemed when they were bouncing around in our heads. Writing also engages different neural pathways than thinking, often leading to insights and perspectives that pure mental analysis cannot provide. The key to effective journaling for overthinking isn't to solve every problem on paper, but rather to create a container for our concerns. We can set aside specific times for worry and reflection, rather than allowing these mental processes to intrude throughout the day. Some people find it helpful to write down their worries, then consciously set them aside, trusting that if action is needed, the appropriate steps will become clear at the right time. Understanding the difference between productive thinking and overthinking is crucial for mental peace. Productive thinking is goal-oriented, time-limited, and leads to either action or acceptance. It might involve planning for an upcoming event, learning from a past mistake, or working through a current challenge. Overthinking, by contrast, is circular, endless, and rarely leads to resolution. It's thinking, a mental hall of mirrors that creates the illusion of progress while actually keeping us stuck. One way to distinguish between these two modes is to ask ourselves, is this thinking moving me toward a solution or deeper into confusion? If we've been pondering the same issue for hours or days without reaching any new insights or taking any concrete steps, we've likely crossed the line into overthinking. At this point, The most productive thing we can do is often to stop thinking about the issue altogether and engage in some other activity. Physical movement can be particularly effective for breaking cycles of rumination. When we walk, exercise, or engage in any form of physical activity, we activate different neural networks and often find that solutions emerge naturally when we're not actively seeking them. Many great insights have come to people while they were walking, showering, or engaged in routine physical tasks. This happens because physical activity quiets the analytical mind and allows more intuitive forms of knowing to surface. The relationship between overthinking and perfectionism deserves special attention. Many people who struggle with excessive mental analysis are driven by a desire to make the perfect decision, to avoid all possible mistakes, or to achieve complete understanding before taking action. This perfectionist mindset keeps us trapped in analysis paralysis, always seeking just a little more information or one more perspective before we feel ready to move forward. Embracing what the Japanese call wabi-sabi, the beauty of imperfection, can be liberating for the overthinking mind. Life is inherently uncertain and imperfect. No amount of mental analysis can guarantee perfect outcomes or eliminate all risks. When we accept this fundamental uncertainty as part of the human condition rather than a problem to be solved, we can make decisions with incomplete information and trust our ability to adapt as circumstances unfold. The concept of good enough becomes revolutionary for those accustomed to endless mental refinement. A decision that's 80% optimal but made with confidence and commitment often produces better results than a theoretically perfect decision that's delayed by months of analysis. This isn't about lowering our standards, but about recognizing that in many situations, action based on reasonable judgment is more valuable than perfect analysis that never leads to action. Sleep plays a crucial role in managing overthinking, though this connection is often overlooked. When we're sleep deprived, our prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive function and emotional regulation, doesn't work as effectively. This makes us more prone to rumination and less able to break out of negative thought cycles. Additionally, many people find that their overthinking is worst at night, when they're tired, but their minds are still active. Creating boundaries around thinking time can be as important as creating boundaries around work time. Just as we might have office hours for professional responsibilities, we can establish specific periods for reflection and problem solving, while protecting other times for rest, play, and simple presence. This doesn't mean suppressing thoughts when they arise outside these designated times, but rather gently noting them and returning attention to whatever we're currently doing. The practice of self-compassion offers another pathway out of overthinking cycles. Often, our mental rumination is fueled by harsh self-criticism. We replay past mistakes, not to learn from them, but to punish ourselves. We anxiously project future scenarios not to prepare for them, but to torture ourselves with possibilities of failure or rejection. When we notice this self-critical quality in our thinking, we can ask ourselves, would I speak to a good friend this way? Usually, the answer is no. Treating ourselves with the same kindness we'd offer a friend creates space for more balanced thinking. Instead of, I can't believe I said something so stupid, we might think, I wish I had expressed myself differently, and I can learn from this experience. This shift from self-attack to self-support often naturally reduces the emotional charge that fuels overthinking. The role of acceptance in managing overthinking cannot be overstated. Much of our mental spinning comes from resistance to what has already happened, or what might happen in the future. We think that if we just analyze the situation enough, we can somehow change the past or control the future. But the past is fixed, and the future is largely beyond our direct control. What we can influence is our response to present circumstances and our preparation for likely future scenarios. Acceptance doesn't mean passive resignation or approval of everything that happens. It means acknowledging reality as it is, rather than as we wish it were, so that we can respond effectively rather than waste energy fighting what cannot be changed. When we accept that we made a mistake, we can focus on making amends or learning from the experience. When we accept that the future is uncertain, we can prepare reasonably without trying to control every variable. The ancient Taoist concept of Wu Wei, often translated as non-action or effortless action, provides another perspective on overthinking. Wu Wei doesn't mean doing nothing, but rather acting in harmony with natural flow, rather than forcing outcomes through excessive effort. In terms of mental activity, this might mean allowing solutions to emerge naturally, rather than trying to think our way to every answer. Sometimes the most productive thing we can do with a problem is to plant it in our subconscious and trust that insights will surface when we're ready for them. This requires a kind of faith in our own deeper wisdom, a trust that we don't have to consciously control every aspect of our mental processing. Many people report that their best ideas come when they're not actively trying to generate them. The practice of meditation, in its many forms, offers direct training in observing mental activity without being controlled by it, whether through focused attention on the breath, open awareness of whatever arises in consciousness, or loving-kindness practices that cultivate positive mental states. Meditation teaches us that we can choose our relationship with our thoughts. We don't have to believe every thought, follow every mental tangent, or solve every problem that our minds present to us. Regular meditation practice reveals that thoughts are much less solid and important than they initially appear. What seems like an urgent concern in the morning might feel completely irrelevant by evening, not because circumstances have changed, but because our mental state has shifted. This recognition of the fluid, impermanent nature of thoughts can be profoundly liberating for those caught in cycles of overthinking. The integration of these various approaches, ancient wisdom and modern psychology, Eastern philosophy and Western therapy, creates a comprehensive toolkit for managing overthinking. The key is not to apply these techniques as rigid rules, but to experiment with them gently, finding what resonates with your particular mind and circumstances. Some people find great relief in journaling, while others prefer meditation. Some benefit from physical exercise, while others find peace in creative activities. What matters most is developing a kind and patient relationship with your own mind. Overthinking is not a character flaw or a sign of weakness. It's a common human experience that arises from our brain's natural tendency to seek safety through analysis and control. Understanding this can help us approach our thinking patterns with curiosity rather than judgment, with compassion rather than criticism. The journey toward mental peace is not about achieving a state where we never have unwanted thoughts or concerns. Such a state would be neither possible nor desirable, as appropriate concern and reflection are valuable aspects of human intelligence. Rather, it's about developing the wisdom to know when thinking is helpful and when it has become a source of suffering, and the skill to gently redirect our attention when we notice we've fallen into unproductive mental loops. As we cultivate this awareness and these skills, we begin to discover something remarkable. The peace we've been seeking through endless analysis was available all along in the simple act of being present. When we're fully here, fully now, there's no past to regret and no future to fear. There's only this moment with its own inherent completeness and sufficiency. This doesn't mean we stop planning for the future or learning from the past. It means we do these things from a place of centered presence rather than anxious compulsion. We think when thinking is called for, and we rest when rest is appropriate. We engage with life's challenges when they arise, and we let go when our mental involvement is no longer helpful. In this letting go, in this gentle release of the need to figure everything out, we find a freedom that no amount of thinking could provide. It's the freedom of trust in life's unfolding, trust in our ability to meet whatever comes, and trust in the fundamental okayness of not knowing everything. This is the peace that lies beyond overthinking, not as an achievement to be grasped, but as a natural state to be rediscovered, again and again, in each moment of conscious presence.